Hello and welcome to the second of our videos looking at the Bottomline PTX Payments Portal. In our first video we looked at the core capability of making BACS or FASTA payment submissions and the collection of BACS reports, as well as some of the administrative control you have over your PTX system. If you haven't already viewed the first video, then I strongly recommend you do so before continuing, as we're going to build on the steps outlined in that session. In that video we saw the three workflow steps involved in making a submission, namely create, where we upload the data files into PTX, approve, and send. In this video we shall look at how we can use additional features of PTX to automate one or more of these steps. So for file upload, we'll take a look at the PTX Drive utility, which can provide automated upload of your data files into the PTX cloud. We'll see how we can use profile settings to turn on automated approval where we want it. And then we'll see how we can use an alternative method from BACS smart cards, known as an HSM, to allow automation of the actual submission to BACS. And we'll take a closer look at the HSM option to see how it can also be used in attended mode as a complete alternative to smart cards. And finally, we'll finish off by looking at the manual data entry feature of PTX. So let's start off by looking at automating the steps involved in making a new submission. If you recall, we saw previously how to browse and select a file manually when we're creating a new submission. We simply select our payment profile and then click on the option to select file, browse for our file, and click open, and it will be loaded up into the cloud, performing full validation as it's uploaded. What we'll take a look at now is how we can automate that file upload using the PTX optional component called PTX Drive. So PTX Drive is the only part of PTX which runs locally on your systems. It's basically going to run in the background on a Windows server or workstation in your environment, and from there it shall monitor a set of input folders where you will place your data files or configure your host systems to generate the files. We can control the location PTX Drive is going to monitor by configuring the settings on our payment profiles. Here under the file import settings, we say whether we want PTX Drive to be used, and we can either specify a relative path like this, relative to the folder that PTX Drive is installed in, or we can specify an absolute path, as in this example here. It's also possible, if we leave the path blank but still turn on the option to use PTX Drive, that PTX Drive will create the folder itself using the profile name to create the folder which is going to be monitored. So let's take a look at PTX Drive in action. We're going to use PTX Drive to upload a new payroll batch into the PTX system. So rather than clicking on new payment and going through the manual method which we've seen previously, I'm going to go to the folders that my PTX Drive system is monitoring. I'm going to go into the payroll one, and I'm going to paste in a sample payroll data file. You can imagine this, your payroll system generating the file. Now you'll see there that the file disappears from that folder fairly quickly because PTX Drive is running in the background, detects that file and uploads it to the PTX cloud. It's possible to configure PTX Drive to keep a local audit copy of the files that are uploaded, just in a subfolder called uploaded, like that. Now we'll receive our email notification that the file has been uploaded, and if we move across to the PTX system now and refresh the screen, we should see that we have a new payroll submission sitting in the entered state. Just take a second to refresh. And there we have our payroll batch sitting in the entered state that's just been automatically uploaded by the PTX Drive system. So that's how we automate the upload of files to PTX. Now we'll look at how we can automate the next step in the workflow, which is approval. Again, just as a reminder, we'll see that if we open this newly entered batch, then the manual method of approval is based purely on our user permissions and simply involves clicking the approve button, typically after checking that we're happy with the data. Now in some scenarios you may not have the need for this manual approve step, For example, you might have certain payment types which are processed by a single person, so you don't need both the approval and the send steps. Or you may just be wanting to automate your submissions as much as possible in PTX, because you already carry out approval steps elsewhere prior to the data being loaded into PTX. We can very easily turn off the manual approval step for any of our payment profiles simply by logging in as an administrator level user and opening up the profile settings. So if I take a look at my payroll profile here, we'll see that we have a simple checkbox to modify this profile to carry out automatic approval. So if we save that change, and then we're going to use PTX Drive to load up another payroll file. So if I go back to the All Payments screen, so we see the existing batches, and then I shall open up PTX Drive where we're waiting on that screen to refresh, and I'm just going to paste in my payroll file into here and load up another batch. Back in PTX, if we refresh the screen, we should see that we have a new payroll batch loaded up, but because we have automatic approval turned on, rather than being sitting in the entered state like our previous one was, the new batch is there in the approved state because it's been automatically approved. So we've seen how we can automate the creation of a new batch by using PTX Drive to upload files, and how we can use profile settings to automate the approval step. All that would remain for this batch would be to send it off to the payment service. And if you recall from our first video, this is where we would typically use our bank issued smart cards to sign and submit the data. Now if you're using that method, obviously this can't be automated because it requires you to enter the card in the reader and then manually enter a PIN code. However, there is an alternative to smart card use which can allow us to automate that step. The option in question is called an HSM, which stands for a Hardware Security Module. And we'll see here on our payment profile that we have the ability to change from smart cards to HSM. Now the HSM is a hardware device which holds certificates provided by your bank, and those certificates are used to sign the submissions and authenticate to the payment service rather than the certificates held on smart cards. With PTX, Bottomline hosts the HSM devices in the cloud, and the PTX system communicates with HSM when requested. Your payment profiles are then configured to use the HSM rather than a smart card. Now when your profiles are configured for HSM use, you'll see it adds an additional option for automated sending. Because there's no longer a need for inserting cards and readers and entering a PIN, it's possible to make the send step automatic. Now if you choose to use that option, then once you've approved a batch, it will be ready for automatic sending, and Bottomline will sweep through your batches back here on the All Payments screen, looking for any that are in the approved state and for profiles which are set for automatic sending, and it will submit these to the payment service using your HSM certificates. The status on the batch will change to sent, and you will receive an email notification telling you when this has happened. Now, automated sending doesn't suit everyone, but some organisations would still like to do away with the inconvenience of smart cards. So it's possible to use the HSM in what we call attended mode. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to use my supplier payments profile for this purpose, and if we look at this profile, we'll see I'm set up for the HSM, but I'm not set to automatically send, and this will force us to use the HSM in what's called attended mode. So I'm just going to use PTX Drive. I could do this manually, but I'm just going to take the shortcut of using PTX Drive to load up a new suppliers file into the system. And let's go back to the All Payments screen, and we should see that we have a new batch loaded. Just take a second or two to refresh that screen. So there is my supplier payments file in the entered state. I'm just going to go ahead and approve that. The HSM use doesn't affect the approval step at all. That's still exactly the same as before. But now if we drill down into our batch and go on to the send step, we'll see where the HSM makes difference. So I'm going to go ahead and click send, and this time, rather than being prompted for a smart card PIN, because we're using the HSM, we now get prompted to re-enter our PTX password. So the first time I'm entering it here is to sign the submission, and then when we click continue, PTX will connect up to the payment service, BACS in this case, and prompt us again for our password to authenticate using the HSM to the BACS service. And when we click continue, the submission will then be submitted to BACS in exactly the same way as we saw with smart card based submission, and we will be returned with our BACS submission summary. So users that you've granted the send permission no longer need to have smart card software or readers on their PCs, and because PTX is all browser based, this opens up the ability for your submitters to use any PC, and in fact any suitable tablet or smartphone could also be used to carry out the BACS submission. Now, some organisations want more security at this step than just a password. Now, if you recall from our first video, we have the ability to use two-factor authentication via a PTX smartphone app. So I'm going to log out and I'm going to log in as a different user. Now, before I do that, let's just load up another supplier payments file while we're waiting. And let's go in and log in as a different user that's set up for this two-factor authentication. So when we have two-factor authentication set up for a user, as well as having to provide their password to log in, they're also going to have to enter a verification code that is currently being displayed on the smartphone app. So when we log in as this user, we should see the suppliers file that we've just loaded up sitting there in the enter state, ready for us to submit. Just take a second or two for the screen to refresh. So this time, if I go ahead and approve that, and then I'm going to go in and try to send it, because this user is set up for two-factor authentication, when I go to send, rather than being asked for my PTX user password, I'm being asked for a verification code. So again, I have to open up the app on the smartphone, find the current verification code and enter that into the system. I'll ask again when it authenticates to the BACS service, and then we will see our data being transmitted. So not only do I need to know my password to get logged into PTX, but I also need send permissions granted to me, and I need to have my specific phone with me in order to get the correct and current verification code to complete the submission process. So in summary, in this video we've seen how we can automate one or more of the submission steps with PTX. We can use PTX Drive to upload files, profile settings to turn on automatic approval, and the HSM signing option to allow us to do automated sending. We've also seen how the HSM can be used as an alternative to smart cards for attended submission as well. We're just going to finish off by looking at an additional feature of PTX, which is manual data entry. So far, all the batches we've loaded into PTX have been from data files produced by our host systems such as our payroll system or our account system. Manual data entry allows us to enter payment transactions directly via the PTX interface instead of reading in a file. So if we take a look at one of my profiles, we'll see that under the File Import tab, I have manual entry as the data entry method selected instead of file import. And if we go ahead and try to use this profile, you'll see that on the opening screen there's no longer any options here for importing a file. Instead, we click continue and we're prompted to start adding payment instructions manually into the system. So we simply click add instruction and then fill out the resulting form. Now I'm going to use some of my browser saved settings here just to save some time. We fill out this form with the payment details, and you'll see we've got transaction type in here as well, so this could be used for direct credits or direct debits or even IDIS transactions, and we can specify our payment date in here as well. So I'm just going to put in a value there. Now when I click save, I've got the option of either stopping at that point or carrying on and adding another transaction. So I'm just going to go ahead and add in another transaction, and this time I'm going to enter in an incorrect sort code just to show that as we're entering it, there's real-time validation taking place to check the sort codes and account numbers. So I'm just going to correct that account number and finish off by putting in some more details here. And then I'm going to stop at that point. So here we see we have our submission ready with 2 transactions that we've just manually entered into the system. We could go back and add further instructions at this point. We could save this and come back to it and add other ones at a later point, or we just simply click continue, and this will be turned into a standard submission ready for us to go through the standard approval and sending steps that we've seen already with our file-based submissions. So that's manual data entry, and it's used primarily for ad hoc type payments or transactions such as expenses, direct debit refunds and the like, any time that we just need to make ad hoc payments where the data is not coming from one of our internal systems via a file. So that completes our second video looking at the PTX payments portal system. Hopefully that information has been useful for you. Do take a look at our first video, which runs through the core functionality and the basic capabilities, and thank you very much for your time.